Well, it's another chapter in one of the NFC's best postseason rivalries. The 49ers at the Eagles. The ghosts of the 2022 NFC title game still linger, but so does San Francisco's history of rising in January. Philly enters as defending champs with dominant defense and a perfect home playoff resume. I got to tell you, I'm very excited about this one. And here to break it all down, we're joined still with Logan Ryan. We also welcome in CBS Sports Evan Washburn. Gentlemen, great to have you both with us for this one. And Evan, I'm going to start with you. The Eagles are chasing back-to-back Super Bowls, but this version looks a little bit different, right? The defense is clearly driving the bus while the offense has stalled this year. How sustainable is that formula for another deep playoff run?
Well, Logan knows this. When you win a Super Bowl, the standard is through the roof. And I think offensively, that's where the tension has seemed to lie when it comes to this Eagles team in 2025. And yes, the defense has led this group to where they are now. And I think it'll lead them throughout the playoffs as long as they can keep winning. I do think that this offense has a version as they're constituted this year with Kevin Petula calling the plays that can be effective enough for this team to repeat as Super Bowl champs. But it is really about their defense. Since the bye week, they've been special. I think since Jalen Carter came back after having his shoulders worked on, has been that dominant force in the interior alongside Jordan Davis and their ability to just cave in offensive lines. And in the playoffs, when the margin for error shrinks even smaller, I think you can lean on a running game, which hasn't been as strong as it was a year ago, but it's still extremely effective with Saquon. And that defense, it's a good formula. But you always feel like with Philly that there's this underlying doubt, whether it's from their fan base, the media corps, not sure what it is. And I think that's what makes Sunday so exciting. They've got to put that to the side pretty quickly and then carry some momentum throughout that game and maybe into the divisional round.
Well, you can tell Evan's been doing his job for quite some time and at a really high level, because he nailed it on the head when he said, when you win a Super Bowl, the expectations are now you're chasing the standards for the rest of your career. That a win doesn't feel like a win. It could have been better. We know what our Super Bowl team felt like, and you're always chasing the previous year. You're chasing that one magical run you had, because it does take a lot of magic in order to put it all together. And that's been the issue with this offense. And A.J. Brown has called that out throughout the year. Saquon didn't perform to the same level. The offensive line hasn't stayed as healthy. Jalen Hurts not the same level. So it all hasn't been as well. But Jalen Hurts is good in the playoffs. I will tell you that. But I'm going to flip it to the 49ers perspective. Okay, when they played this NFC Championship game, the 49ers felt like that would have went in their favor if Brock Purdy's elbow didn't fall off, right? So that was a huge thing. I think Purdy has had a really good year. I think he's proved a lot of doubters wrong. And I know for sure, I didn't play in an NFC Championship game for the Niners a few years ago, but in 2023 I played for the Niners. They are confident playing against Jalen Hurts. They have a game plan, game rush against Jalen Hurts that if you look at the numbers, he doesn't always play his best against the Niners. Now look, that includes Nick Bosa, that includes Fred Warner and some of the guys who are hurt. So that's the hardest part about it, the Niners' injury history. But defensively, they're confident playing against Jalen Hurts. I know that firsthand. Offensively, Trent Williams may be coming back. Christian McCaffrey's Offensive Player of the Year, in my opinion, and Brock Purdy's playing the best ball of his career. So I think they might have enough, but this game is going to be exciting. This game is going to be electric, and I can't wait to see it play out.
Back to the Eagles' perspective, because you mentioned it, this Eagles team version looks very different, right? You got Evan, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley. This offense shouldn't look average, but why does it still feel so hard for Philly to score?
Well, I think because you've got to feed all those guys, and it impacts what your identity is. I think when they were at their best last year, they recognized that Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown are all pro caliber wide receivers, but the strength of this team is the run game because of Saquon and what Jalen can do with his legs as well, and leaning on that offensive line as run blockers. And I think this year, again, you have to acknowledge another new play caller searching for the 2025 identity of this team. And it appears, at least throughout the 17-game season, that they wanted to protect Jalen Hurts as best they can because he was banged up going into the playoffs last year. It all worked out. They won a Super Bowl, but they had to ride his health in those key moments. And now he goes into a postseason as healthy as he's been. Same can be said for Saquon. And I think they feel like inside that building, guys, that they know what they are offensively, despite all the doubt on the outside and questions, legitimate questions from everybody. And I think it's going to be rooted back to the run game. And that might frustrate A.J. Brown in some moments and Devontae Smith not getting the targets they want. But especially against San Francisco, because Logan touched on the knee injuries. The one area, though, that we haven't hit yet, that linebacker core, yeah, Fred Warner's been out for a while, but his backup and his backup's backup are now injured. I mean, they might be running up against guys that joined this team in the last couple weeks. And you throw in the mix that you've got that offensive line for Philadelphia completely whole once again. And to me, it's going to be a heavy dose of Saquon. And I think they're going to unleash Jalen the runner now that it's win or go home.
Football is a player's game. Players play the game, right? We understand we pay players handsomely to play the game. But it is the most important sport for the coaching. And the reason why the Eagles' numbers, we throw that up, are so poor is because Kellen Moore is now coaching for the Saints. They don't have the same play caller from last year.
Vanilla.
And you cannot feed that many mouths if you don't have a play caller in command that can say, no, you be quiet. This is our offense. AJ, I love you, brother, but this is Derrick Henry's offense. That's how it worked in Tennessee. And AJ ate while Derrick ate. But you can't feed too many mouths if you don't have control. They don't have control. And you got to also be, I know this from experience, you got to be wary of thinking you're just going to turn it on in the postseason. Hey, we haven't figured it out in November. We don't got to figure it out in December. We're going to rest them. But then we're going to just turn it on because I know Kyle Shanahan knows how to coach and Robert Saleh knows how to coach. So I know the Niners are banged up again, but the coaching advantage goes to San Francisco heavily in this game because the Eagles have not gotten their own way, out of their own way offensively. Defensively, Vic Fangio is as good as they come. I've seen it firsthand, but offensively, they don't know what they're doing. They haven't shown that. When you have that type of talent and you're 27th or lower in offense, I mean, it's the 5 worst teams. Crazy. Offensively, you're paying too much money on offense for that. They have a coaching issue offensively, in my opinion, and now you got to go against some of the 2 best coaches on the other side.
I got to say, as a 49ers fan, I'm about ready to run through a brick wall every time Logan talks about my team. But, Evan, let me ask you, as maybe more of an unbiased, not that you are biased, I know you're unbiased, but you do have love. But you do have love for the organization. Brock Purdy and the Niners offense, they already had a tough assignment, right? Now they may not have Trent Williams at full strength. He was practicing yesterday, which was promising, against a Vic Fangio defense that just lives on pressure. So how do the Niners realistically survive this matchup in the trenches?
This is the game right here for me. The price of admission is Kyle Shanahan scheming it up against, as Logan touched on, Vic Fangio. I mean, these are 2, you could argue, I mean, you throw Sean McVay in the mix offensively, 2 of the best play designers, scheme designers on either side of the ball of the last decade plus. The name you didn't mention that I think is as important, I mean, Trent Williams is a Hall of Famer, and the numbers are stark in terms of when he plays and doesn't. But Ricky Pearsall is kind of a big question mark, too. And with where they are in terms of personnel outside of Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, he's been thrust into a wide receiver 1 role, and he didn't play in Week 18. He's been managing this knee injury all season long. Still a question mark right now. I think they're probably practicing as we speak out on the West Coast, so we don't know if he's back at it because he wasn't there Wednesday, wasn't there Thursday. They need him, Katie, on Sunday as they go up against this defense because, yeah, they're going to look for ways to win the line of scrimmage, which is going to be a challenge against that front of Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and everybody they got now with Phillips joining that Eagles squad. But they're going to look to run the ball, and they're going to look to use ways to scheme up Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle. But I think the Pearsall, his availability is as important as any of it because if they can't at least threat to stretch the field, then it allows Philadelphia and Vic to really dial up making things challenging in terms of running the ball and winning that line of scrimmage for San Francisco.
The 49ers offense has been on fire until they played Seattle in Week 18.
They were due for a dud.
And Vic Fangio is more than able and capable in this Eagles defense to replicate what Seattle did, right? So you're going to have to, I think if Trent Williams plays, Evan mentioned it, it's a huge game changer, right? But Purdy is going to have to be special. It's going to look like Week 16 and Week 17 and not Week 18. So is that a dud? Or is that just playing a great defense? Well, it's going to be somewhere in the middle, I bet.
Yeah.
So I know that Purdy is going to have to bring out that Dougie and get moving outside the pocket at times because he's going to have to. I believe the kid's special. I've seen him firsthand. He's going to have to do stuff after the play. Right. Shanahan's offense is all about timing, getting it out quick, finding Christian, finding George, finding his weapons in space. But sometimes when that doesn't happen, when Cooper DeJean, some of the Eagles' best players are on the inside of that defense. Zach Bond, Cooper DeJean, Jalen Carter. They're going to run the ball to the perimeters. They're going to run away from that core of that Eagles defense, try to get to the outside, and not Purdy's going to extend plays. He's going to play his best game of probably of his career or close to it in order to scrape this one out. Listen, if the Niners had the 1 seed and they won that game, we're talking about their Super Bowl favorites. Now, a week later, we're talking about their underdogs on the road. Welcome to the NFL. That's why it's so hard to win a championship.
We touched on how they have to win in the trenches, but this team beat up everywhere, as I feel like we talk about every hour of the day. We touched on Trent Williams and this O-line, but also the linebacker position as well. Skill guys, how can this group keep surviving the injuries into January and still make it to the Super Bowl in their own home stadium?
Well, they have experience with injuries. This has been the Niners' issue every single year. And Kyle Shanahan's a heck of a coach. We talk about the coaching staff, but last year they had injuries. The year prior they had injuries. They always have injuries, so they know how to deal with injuries. And that's why they dealt with it so well this year. To do what they did without a number 1 wide receiver, their quarterback missing 7 games, the left tackle being injured, your star pass rusher, we know how important pass rush is, to be out for the season. Oh, by the way, the best defensive player outside of Myles Garrett, Fred Warner, out for the season. He is the sole alpha leader of that team. For him to be out, to them be in his position, talks about the coaching job that Kyle Shanahan has done. And you have to understand in football, coaching matters so much, especially in the playoffs, which is essentially a Game 7 in any other sport. So I think Kyle Shanahan will have to create a great game plan, right? And obviously, this defense and the pass rush without Bosa is going to have to use that Jalen Hurts pass rush that they talk about and keep Jalen Hurts that number off low and off track. And hopefully, in the fourth quarter, someone's got to make a play.
Yeah, I agree with Logan. I think this has been Kyle Shanahan's arguably best coaching job he's done in his career, and that includes, obviously, trips to the Super Bowl. I think this is going to be pretty obvious in probably the first few series of this game. We'll know by the end of the first quarter if the San Francisco defense is where my attention is when it comes to a health perspective. Touched on it a couple times. The idea that next man up is part of the lifeblood of this league is a reality, but at some point you've hit the next man that is a bridge too far. And I think at that interior linebacker position where they find themselves and who they're facing, because Philly would like to run the ball and can run the ball, and now having Lane Johnson back, having their offensive line as healthy and as whole as it's been in a while, I think that we'll know, based off of how they're able to move the ball on the ground, if San Francisco is ready to hold up. Because this is not going to be a shootout. As effective as Kyle is at scheming up offense, this isn't a game where against that defense in Philadelphia that you think that you can match a Philly team if we're living in the high 20s and 30s. This is a game on San Francisco's terms that they're able to win the way it kind of, in my mind, showed itself in the Buffalo game, where if Josh makes that throw on the 2-point conversion, they're walking away with a win. In a lot of ways, that's where I see this game with San Francisco going, maybe, creeping towards 20. That's the environment they need to live in. And that's going to fall on this defense that has just been so ravaged. But I do feel like early in this game we'll know, hey, do these guys playing linebacker for San Francisco, can they do what they need to do? Because the line of scrimmage, I think, is one as they take the field for Philly, and it's going to fall on those linebackers that are going to be seeing the Saquon and Jalen and all those big bodies up front for 4 quarters.
We talk about the coaching, and you mentioned Kyle Shanahan. He has probably suffered postseason losses almost worse than anybody else has, right? We're talking blown leads. We're talking Super Bowl losses. We're talking freak accidents, right, when it happens with Brock Purdy in that last NFC Championship game. That experience matters, and we might see the toughest version of Shanahan that we've seen. Again, I'm a little bit biased here, but who wins this game, Logan?
I have the Niners winning the game, and not because they have the healthier players, not because they have the more stars. It's because they've been playing better football in November and December. And like I said, they were a week away of the Seattle, 10 points away from being the number 1 seed when the Super Bowl is being hosted in Santa Clara. So last week they were everyone's favorite. This week they're an underdog. The Eagles have not been consistent at all year long, and I think resting those starters last week when they could have found some rhythm is going to go back and bite Nick Sirianni. I got the Niners covering this one.
All right, Niners covering this one. Evan, I know you're going to be at the game, so maybe no official game pick for you, but is there anything in particular you're looking out for?
I feel like if I'm not on the call, can I make a pick?
Make a pick. Let's go.
I think I'll lean Philadelphia's way here without being official about it. I agree with Logan. It's been an up and down season for the Eagles, but until I see that version in the postseason, and again, kind of like we saw maybe a few years ago, we'll know pretty quickly, like what happened to him down in Tampa. I do think there's some experience and there's this feeling of, hey, it's us against maybe even our home fan base in terms of the doubters. So I'll lean Philly's way, but I am excited to see early in this game and probably throughout the first few quarters, just how Kyle Shanahan and Vic Fangio are kind of trying to dial things up against one another because they're buddies. There's some age gap there, but there's a lot of mutual respect. They've gone up against each other a bunch as play callers, and now you get it on a pretty big stage. And those are always the games within the game that are fun to follow.
Didn't Shanahan try to bring Vic Fangio on board? It got blocked somewhere, right? But I think he wanted him as a DC at one point in time.
He did, yeah. There was that period where post-Denver for Vic Fangio, and then he ends up in Philly as a consultant, and then all of a sudden he's there as maybe Miami and then to Philly. But there's ties there that go back to his dad, and it's to me the two guys that are at the highest or near the top of the list on either side of the ball doing their thing here in the playoffs.
Hopefully you're texting Evan after the game. I told you so.
Yeah, I hope
while
so
he's
too,
on the sideline.
I hope so too.
Evan, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us here on CBS Sports Network. Logan is staying put. Catch the NFL Today Plus on CBS, delivering the biggest stories, expert analysis, everything you need to know before kickoff at noon Eastern.